Welcome to another Foil Drive podcast. Today we're doing a little bit of a different one. It's more of a tech talk. I'm here with Paul Martin, the founder and owner of Foil Drive, and we've got some really exciting news that we're bringing a new line to Foil Drive. So if you want to start off, Paul, with introducing what we've got coming.
Yeah, so we've released the new HP range, which is essentially a new battery system, so that the max power was the battery, the biggest capacity battery you could get for a Gen 2 before this one. And really what this is more capacity squeezed into exactly the same profile and shape. So technically it's like 19.1%, but to make it an easier number, we'll just say for the reference of this conversation, it's about 20% more capacity. And the new HP motor, which is like a bolt-on upgrade versus the normal V2 motor. So they're both V2 architecture in that they've got the integrated plug, so you can swap them in and out. But the idea behind the HP motor and the normal motor is it's like tuning a wing. You go to the beach or wherever you're going, you open up your car and you've got probably at least one or two wings. They do different things on different days. So we wanted to make the motor system tunable as well. So you can just really go crazy as to how far you want to take your foil driving tunability to that next level.
Yeah, so just to clarify to the listeners here that can't see the visuals, HP stands for high powered. And even though that doesn't quite really sum up exactly what these products do, because the main point of this high powered range is that realistically you're just getting more efficiency out of your whole setup. Is that correct, Paul?
Yeah, it's that's where a marketing team and a web team and a development team and then an engineering team and all these people get together and they try and negotiate on the best naming convention. Realistically, it should be like the HP/EF range, efficiency range, higher power. But it's just too wordy and it gets annoying. So,
but also to sum that up. You have unlocked with the new app extra boost and extra power, right? So it's not. Yeah. It is actually unlocking a new power that once before wasn't there, and also more runtime. So it's realistically it's better in all ways. And I'm just curious to hear why someone would not opt for this versus kind of what an original V2 motor is.
Yeah.
Just want to hear kind of your thoughts behind that.
No, you're right. It's the best way I can describe the reason why we did this is there is plenty of people out there that are having so much fun already foil driving that don't want the fun to stop. That boils down to runtime. So everyone wants more runtime. It's pretty unanimous. Runtime is an interesting number, and this is supposed to be a long-form podcast, so I suppose I can indulge myself in explaining things in hopefully not boring detail, but necessary detail. Runtime is a funny one. So people will ask me all the time, well, how long does it last? I'm sure anyone that owns a foil drive and has been caught on the beach or a car park by someone has asked that question, how long does it run? That's such a difficult question to answer if you're trying to give someone, the truth's the wrong word, just give them something accurate. So you and I are very different capabilities in foiling, and we also have different body mass. Your level of efficiency surpasses mine by quite a lot in just technique. You come down less, you get up quicker, you're lighter, you're faster, you read the swell better. You basically do everything better, annoyingly. I know from experience trying to chase you on downwinders. I'm like, this guy is so quick. Anyway, you'll just get so much more out of your battery than I will because of the deficiencies that I have. So efficiency really boils down to how much capacity you've got and how well do you use it. So that's why I try to say in the release videos, without going on and on, it's like the HP battery, yes, it unlocks more power, and you alluded to that before correctly. We actually give you more power output, and you can unlock even more boost with this battery. But really, the main point of this battery is to just stretch your session time by roughly 20%, because it's just 20% more fuel in the tank. You know what I mean? But yes, it can give you more thrust through the app. The motor, the bigger motor, it's a HP motor because it has a higher power. It produces more thrust, but if you left the app the same, it still technically draws the same amount of power that this motor draws, but it just uses it better. It's more efficient at consuming that electricity and turning it into useful thrust. So this is where I've had like quite long conversations with customers who've been testing it. So you've got two different ways to look at this. You can use the HP motor and turn it onto high, put it onto maximum boost, and then with the HP battery up to 28% boost. And you'll end up with a system that produces more thrust, and it's going to feel more powerful because it has more power available to it. But more importantly, it just uses it more efficiently, so you create more kilos of thrust than the standard V2 motor. But you could do the complete opposite, which is you could turn it down to, say, medium power and 10% boost, for example. And the HP motor would consume less wattage, less power than the normal V2 motor, but produce the same amount of kilos as the original V2 on high boost, if that makes sense. So if you were to set up the HP motor for ultimate efficiency and maximum runtime, you'd actually turn it down and then turn the boost down, and you're going to get quite a lot longer runtime because you're not going to allow yourself to consume excess energy because you don't actually need it by like deliberately turning it down. But that's such a slippery slope, because what happens is you put the bigger motor on, you turn it up, and you go like, oh, this is heaps more powerful, way more grunty. I personally, in testing it, I now find myself getting on foil on the flat, pointing towards the wave into the wind. I would never do that before. I'd be going downwind, maybe with a little bump, trying to be efficient to get on foil because I didn't have as much thrust and I didn't want to burn as much power. But then when you've got all this extra horsepower and grunt underneath, you just get acclimatized to it, and then you just get used to it, and then you find yourself, in my case, misusing it.
Yeah, and, that's a super interesting point. And that's something that from the first time like I hopped on the Gen 2 system, I realized for my weight and the boards and the foils I was riding, I didn't need max power, max boost. It just, it wasn't necessary for me. So I always toned down in the app those settings. And then now with this new HP line, I'm doing it once again. I'm toning it down, and instead, because like, you know, all these products, they're made for different uses. Like I know for a fact, we've given this product to Jeremy Wilmot, who is like, I think he's 100 kilos. He's 6'6", and he is someone, and he loves riding tiny foils. So as soon as we told him this, he slammed his boost up to 28% max power.
You only have 24.
He's getting up like flat water, little foils, no issues at all. Versus I've gone the opposite direction and I've toned everything down, and I'm just getting longer runtime.
Yeah, exactly. So I didn't mean to interrupt you before. I couldn't help my brain. He actually only has the 24% at the moment.
Okay.
When the app gets released for the public consumption, then it'll unlock to 28%. With the battery, but you're right.
Yeah, I think it's more like just reverting back to what you said in the opening line, is that we've just got more tunability now. We're opening it up to more people. You know, if you're heavier or got less technique under your belt, you've got more power to make up for that. Or if you're super lightweight and you just want, 20%, 30% more runtime than what you're getting before, now you've got it. So it's
exactly.
It's opening up the door for a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can go about doing it, but what really is really hard is preserving the fundamentals, which I get so worked up about, is trying to keep everything as lightweight and as small and as durable as you sort of can, and preserve that purest feeling. I mean, that's what we're all really chasing. Again, the throwaway line is like foil drive is at its best when it's not in use. Like once you're up and you shut the motor down, that's actually when, for most people, unless you're e-foiling around, that's what you're all hunting for. So we want to preserve that as much as we can. So the HP battery really allowed us to push an extra 20% in there without any additional negative, other than the cost of having to physically buy it. Look, battery tech improves, it changes over time, so that's going to constantly improve over time. But other than the physical cost of the battery, there's no drawback per se.
Surely there's something. So you're saying that the actual battery doesn't weigh more or anything like that?
No. I mean, if it weighed more, might be like 30 or 40 grams into a 2,000 gram sort of item. We're talking irrelevant percentiles. The batteries fluctuate that much in weight anyway, just between manufacturing because of the amount of resin that goes into them. So they're the same.
And have you found with the HP V2 motor,
yep,
it's did you say it's 20 mil longer than the original V2 motor?
It's only 10 mil.
10 mil. Okay, so it's a tiny bit longer.
I'm trying to remember what that is in inches, and I'm not.
I think maybe a quarter inch or something.
It's not much, so.
Yeah. So, visually, you can see it a tiny bit bigger, but have you found testing it performance-wise, it's noticeable? Does it create more drag when you hit the water with the pod, or? So,
as you were saying before, so rightfully, tunability is something we're always chasing because these systems can be so different for everyone. In testing it and using it and feedback from customers, early adopters, there's no way of disguising the fact that it is a little bit heavier. Not by much, we're talking very small amounts, but there's a little bit of extra mass. You just have to do it. If you want a bigger magnet and more copper windings to make more power and make more efficiency, you can't do that by wishful thinking. You actually have to physically put it there. So there's a little bit of extra mass and it's a little bit longer. We're talking 10 mil or whatever that is in inches. Not much. I'd say, a quarter of an inch, something like that. It's very minute. Me personally, I can tell the difference between a V2 and a HP slightly. But I wouldn't say it's incredibly obvious. What is obvious is just how much easier it is to get going. What's even more pronounced and obvious is when you drop off foil, if you're going too slow or you do too much of a turn or whatever it is, and you go to stall the wing. I found myself in the past being a lot more cautious about maintaining momentum and speed to give the motor time to build up enough thrust to get you back on the foil and get going. But now with the HP, I find myself being far less concerned with that. I can almost turn off the wave, even be in a conversation with my mate who's just literally in the water, flop off foil, and then just punch it and go straight back up onto foil. It's got so much more authority and so much more torque that I find myself being so much more cavalier and less concerned about, am I coming off foil? Have I got enough speed? I just slam the throttle and I go again. That for me is probably the biggest benefit, is just the sheer torque it has straight out of the get-go. And obviously the efficiency. I love stretching those run times. So I used to get about 50 minutes out of a normal max power on a sort of a typical session at U-turns, which is the best place to sort of get a time because the waves are quite consistent. It's generally relatively sheltered. And as long as there's physical swell, you can always get on a wave. It's just rinse and repeat. over and over and over again. So that helps with consistency when you're trying to test stuff, as opposed to other beach breaks, which can vary massively on the day. So I used to get about 50 minutes, but I used to ride slightly bigger foils. Now I'm riding smaller and smaller foils. So on a max power battery, I used to be at 50. Now I'd kind of get down to like 40 minutes. But again, that's just constantly going. I'm not stopping. Like, the only time I would stop is if I hit lead or I fell off. And then recently I've been testing the HP battery and the HP motor together, same triple prop, same wing, same board, same location, same day. I would do back-to-back testing, and I'd go from 40 minutes up to 58.
Oh, so wow.
It's about 40% more overall runtime. It's actually more than that. It's like, I think it's quick math, it's like 44%, something like that. Because 40% would be 4, 8, 12, 16, would be 56 minutes. So, 45% more runtime. Now, where is that coming from? It's a simple case of the battery's got about 20% more juice runtime, and the motor is about 20 to 25% more efficient at producing thrust. So you add those two numbers up, and it shouldn't be a surprise that it gets you that 40-45%, which is not a small increase. That's quite a significant bump in runtime and performance. For overall, I think it's about 100 and something grams, 150 grams, I think, at worst case, extra mass. And you can barely tell the difference, for me.
Wow. Yeah,
it's pretty sick. It's like,
I've definitely noticed it too. Like, one of the biggest testing things that I've done recently with comparing the original motor and battery to the HP ones is that I've been doing upwind, downwind, and with doing it back to back on same foils, similar like conditions, I've been not as much as what you said, 45% increase in time, but I've been getting at least 20% increase in time out there.
Just using the HP motor?
Literally, yeah.
Yeah, so that makes sense, because I'm getting the 40-45 because I'm using the motor and the battery. So you're not using the battery.
Oh no, sorry. Yeah, no, I meant both. Yeah.
Okay, so you're using both?
I've just said I've noticed about a 20% increase. But, if you're trying to compare upwind, downwinds on different days, there's always so many variables. But if I can see a clear 20% increase, if that's the minimum that I'm getting, I'm happy, because, that equates to pretty much 2 extra kilometers that I can get out of my session.
And that's where it becomes almost pointless trying to do like a percentage increase in downwind scenarios, especially ups and downs, because if you went and did another session even the next day, different wind, different current, different water, different waves, straight up different result. So that's what I was saying before when we were doing our testing. The way I do testing, for anyone that's interested, is like I will look at just the raw fundamental components. So I go, okay, so the physical cell composition should give me X based on paper, and the physical motor makeup, the magnets, the windings, the torque ratios, the testing we've done on like a calibrated load. So every motor that we try and develop goes on a load scale. So it's a calibrated load sensor, and we can actually measure how many kilos or pounds of thrust you get for X amount of wattage of power input. So it's not a guess. It's just a straight up number that's calculated from the theoretical, tested results. So I take those results and the cell data, put them together, and I go, okay, now I should be able to go to this very consistent break, and I should expect the outcome to be X. And that's exactly what I do. So, and it's normally very, very close. There will always be subtle differences in every time you go out, you do things slightly differently. Maybe you stuff up a few takeoffs or hit more weed one time, but it's very, very close. So the best way to actually quantify a change is to do back-to-back testing in the same conditions, which I'm sure you would know, testing wings. You can't.
Yeah.
You can't deduce the same result from 2 different days that easily.
You just have to do a lot of sessions and get an average. That's what you have to do. And there's no just going out there and after 2 sessions being like, oh, that's definitely it. Yeah. No. But I think another question that you kind of just answered before was that if you weren't to buy the HP battery and the HP motor, can you buy one or the other and still see an improvement?
Yeah. So with four-wheel drive, we always try and make sure that the customer has a lot of choice, because we don't want to dictate to people what you have to buy. And we don't want to make the system unless you're constantly on that purchasing train, it won't stay relevant or it won't continue to work. I think we've made that clear. That's not what we do. So we just wanted to offer at the detriment of us, because this is another set of SKUs we have to have, another set of products we have to buy and store and distribute. We just wanted to offer the customer base choice. If people are really chasing more runtime, then they can pay a little bit extra and get the biggest capacity cell you can currently get. I would love to be able to produce them and make them cheaper, but it just doesn't work like that. Like if you want the latest thing, it generally costs more. So you can buy the battery on its own for just sheer runtime and a little bit more boost with the app, which comes with the battery. Or you can buy the HP motor and just reuse everything you've got, and you've just got a more powerful, higher torque motor. Or you can do both. But again, the choice is yours. There'll be plenty of people that won't buy either of them because they're already just stoked with what they're doing, and their value proposition for them might not make sense. But then there'll be plenty of people that are like, hell yeah, I want 20 or 40% more runtime. I know some guys that go through 4 batteries a session. They just can't get enough of it. So they'll be able to stretch out the same session time, do it over 3 batteries, something like this.
If you had a slim system and put on the HP motor, would you get more out of your slim system?
Definitely, yeah. It actually has arguably slightly more impact on a slim, in that the slim has considerably less capacity to work with, and you're always chasing efficiency there. So even though it's the same motor and it has the same attributes, I know one of our team riders, Matt McKinnon, he's riding his slim now and he's getting 45-minute sessions on a little performance. Now,
he's insane.
Yeah. I think he said he even did a 50-minute session the other day, but I don't know where they time it in and out. But my point is he's stoked on it. He's having an absolute ball. But he's a lighter guy, and he's quite a good foiler, so he can eke the most out of it. So, but I mean, what have we got now? We've got the performance and the endurance for the slim, and then we've got the sport, the max power, and now the HP for the max, and then obviously the 2 different travel batteries. So what's that? 7 batteries systems. It's enough to make any man cry when you have to deal with them all.
I think the one thing that I think everyone can feel with the difference between a full battery and a battery that's getting down to 20%, does the new HP battery feel like a full battery the whole way to the end?
Good question. So the HP battery will feel punchier at the beginning, especially if you've turned it up to 28%. It will just straight up feel more powerful, have more power, be more powerful, full stop. But what happens is as a battery voltage goes down, and this is the same for all batteries everywhere, as the battery voltage goes down, your ability to draw power out of that battery comes down too. So just because it's a HP battery with extra capacity doesn't mean it gets to cheap physics and just be this magical thing until the end. It still feels really good. They all decay with voltage. So one thing I have to preface is if you turn the HP battery up to 28% boost, it's going to feel really powerful and grunty for the first, say, half of the battery, if you will. But then the last half of the battery, it might feel like it's less powerful than the normal max power. But that is because it's more of a placebo effect and psychological effect, because you got used to that extra grunt up front when you get towards the end of the battery, and it doesn't have the ability give you the full power output. It feels like it's losing power. It feels like, it doesn't feel like it's punching. It's just the way batteries are. So it depends on how you use it. If you left all the settings exactly the same, it's going to feel very much like max power that just runs longer. If you don't turn it up in the app, it's not going to give you any extra power. The app will dictate how much power comes out. It's just, it will do it for longer. But if you turn it up, it will give you more power. So again, super tunable. You can tune it however you like. You're going to have very different setup to me. And we want to make this foil drive always aspire to be the most customized, tunable, forward and backwards compatible like assist you can get, period. We'll always strive to make sure that it's the best thing you can get. For good reason, we want performance. We're performance orientated, and I personally just love to push things to see how far you can take it. I'm not interested in mediocre stuff. There's plenty of that out there.
I think what's interesting is that I'm curious to know why you didn't just, if you're looking for more efficiency, why you didn't just create a bigger battery.
So Shim, you're saying why didn't I just make like a longer battery?
Yeah, like I've seen other products are just making bigger batteries. Like why didn't you just do that?
Because it would ruin performance of the feel of foiling. So sure, we could make a longer nose cone and stuff more cells in it and just keep pushing it further and further and further out. But because Gen 2 is designed to be over the base plate, the mass is above the base plate and it's between the board. If you keep pushing the cells further and further out, you're going to make a more nose-heavy system, so it doesn't feel as balanced. So, and we don't expect people to go and like if we made a longer battery, that performance detriment will always be there. So we're better off getting higher capacity in the same form factor, so the mass and the balance and the whole system doesn't change. It just lasts longer. So, sure, we could make a longer, bigger battery. I could make a battery that we've made batteries that plug into the unit and then wrap around the side of the unit, and it's like double the amount of cells. We've done all sorts of weird stuff, but it's a tricky, slippery slope between making something that feels good when you have to drag it through the water because it's an exposed unit on board, and making it cost effective, making it balance, all these things. Also, we didn't want people to have to change anything other than the battery. So you can use the same nose cone, you work with it the same, you use the same charger, the same LiPo bags, all that sort of stuff. So we wanted to make it minimal impact. And those that want the performance, it's available. Those that don't, they don't have to buy it.
If, like, going back to the branding of it, high performance, do you have to be a good rider to be able to use these products, or?
Yeah. No. Arguably, it's probably better suited for the non-high performance riders. When I say better suited, it's just going to give them more benefit because they're going to need it more. If you're a really high performance rider like yourself, I think unless you're doing an upwinder, I would argue that you probably don't need more power and runtime for your surfing. But for most people that aren't elite foilers, like yourself, it's going to be a longer session on the water and an easier session, and get up easier, catch waves easier. One of the things I forgot to mention is when you put the two-blader back on the HP motor, you get quite a speed increase. I was playing around with it on the weekend, actually, and full speed tucked in, you can go quite a bit faster than you're carrying on the current V2 motor, because that motor's got more torque. It just forces that propeller to go through the water quicker, and top speed goes right up. So that can be super useful for catching big groundswell much further out on like a beach break, where it's, unless you're going at the same speed of the wave, you can't sort of like catch the cadence of the wave. So that's kind of useful.
I'm kind of here, like, because we're talking about like all things high performance. Yep. What is your setup now? Like, obviously you probably ride the most high performance setup because you've got access to everything.
Yeah.
How do you rig up your setup in terms of tunability? Like, what are you riding to make it the best setup, best foil drive setup you can get?
Well, I obviously tic-tac between writing stuff that I'm working on and then writing stuff that is currently available. I think like any foil brand, the heads of engineering or design or creating, they don't often ride the most recent production stuff because it actually is working on the new stuff. But for me, when I'm writing, recently I've been riding a Gen 2 with the HP battery and the HP motor in the Cruiser 5.4 RTS board, which...
That's the trench, right?
The trenched board with our new split bolt system, which I don't know if we're putting in this video or not, but and the 3-blade prop. And it's the sickest setup ever. No limits. I have a 78 no limits with a HP motor at 15 centimeters, and I have a 85 no limits mast with the HP motor at 20 centimeters. So
and that's integrated, right?
Both integrated.
Yeah.
Caveat on that, if people want the HP motor built into a no limits mast, we're not doing that just yet. Won't be far off. It's just a production change that we've got to do to make that happen. So it's kind of a little bit annoying that I'm writing something that you can't just immediately go and buy. But that's coming. As we release this, China's gone into Chinese New Year, which just mucks up the entire global production runs of lots of stuff. And getting things in and out of China in time is really hard to predict sometimes in advance. So we're releasing the HP motor as, a bolt-on HP system, so you can put it on any mast with the external cable system. But it will be available on the No Limits in future, as it will also be usable on... We're working with about 10 different brands at the moment, where they're making fully molded carbon fiber masts that their brand makes, where the pod is molded into the mast. And that's another reason why we developed tunability in the motor, is you'll be able to bolt on different motor packages to those masts, just like you do an external pod, to change the way you ride. So, yeah, RTS Cruiser, trenched, HP battery, HP motor, on the No Limits with the split bolts, because it makes it super easy to get on and off. Oh, it's sick. It's so good.
And I'm curious why, by combining all those things, what are you getting that, say, like a non-trench board or a non-integrated mast doesn't do? Like, what feelings are you getting that are better than writing something else?
I think integrated mast is super easy. It just feels slipperier, and the convenience of it just going... I leave the mast bolted to the unit, so I can just put the whole mast and unit on the board, clonk, and with our new split bolt system, where the bolts are literally poking up out of the board, it's so easy to set up a rig. Like, I can put together my entire Gen 2 mast on a board with split bolts quicker than I used to be able to put a normal mast onto a normal board. Like, it's so easy. I lost my train of thought. Yeah, so it's just it's slipperier, and it feels better through the water. It's also just more efficient because you're not pushing a cable through water. So you do get more thrust and a little bit more runtime from those efficiencies. But for me, the trenched board, and look, we've been playing around with trench board for a while. It's not like a new thing. It's just the market's taken a while for them to get their head around it. For me, the best thing about a trench board is I just get to take those core fundamentals, which is the mast placement is right beneath the base plate, right in the middle of where the mast is. You want to keep that as close to that as you can. We're now pushing the mass further into the center of the board. So you've got... If you took a board and you looked at it from side on, there's going to be a line that goes through the board at some point which indicates where its center of axis of mass is. That's in all three axes. Normally, this direction doesn't change. Where the center of mass resides on this axis will change. So if your Gen 2 unit's below the board, that line is going to be further away from the center of the board. But when you push the Gen 2 unit into the board, that line starts to come up and gets closer and closer to the actual center of the board. So all that really means is when you're, despite it being exactly the same weight, because the mass is closer to that center line or axis point, it's easier for you to change direction, and it should feel more natural under your feet because you're able to move that mass easier with less pendulum effect. It's like if you're holding a mass in your arm here and doing that, it's easier to do it than if I held it out here and did it like that. Same amount of mass. For those that can't see me because they're listening, I'm just holding my arm close to my chest, easy, and then I push my arm full length out. It's harder to move the same amount of mass because of the leverage associated with it. So I'll stop prattling on about it. It just feels better because it is better. You're putting the mass in the most optimal point, which is the center. Now, Gen 2 has been built around being bolt-on upgrade to any board. We wanted to make it fit any and every board so anyone can use it. But if you're always chasing the best thing, or you're always chasing the optimum performance for something, that's typically where concession comes in. You have to make certain concessions to have the optimum thing. Now, in this instance, if you want the optimum feel and optimum performance, the trench board, the only concession you're having to make is really you do have to buy a specific board, and then the unit, if you're using a super trench like DC does, you can take the nose cone off, put a battery in and shut it like Rock Purist does. But if you want a really tight trench that doesn't have lots of gaps like you've been riding recently, you do have to take the unit out to replace the battery. Now, me personally, I might at best get a 2 battery session every now and then. So taking the unit out to slap a new pack in to go out again might take me 1 minute with split bolts. It's just a no-brainer. It just doesn't faze me at all. I'm definitely going to take the trench board option and have it all closer to my feet for that feel and that overall pureness of it than I would worry about the inconvenience of a bolt board.
Yeah, I think one thing that you glazed over too was you just got to think of hydrodynamics. Now you have the battery and the unit in the board, so water has actually got an easier way to flow over the bottom shape of the board now, right?
Yeah. So Gen 2 is just, we went through a lot of effort to make Gen 2 as narrow as possible. I'm talking like the width of the unit. We've made it as narrow as we possibly can. We still have to factor in that there's a fundamental limit, which is basically the width of a base plate. You don't really want to go much narrower than that because then it doesn't work as well and looks funny. We want to keep it narrow, so that narrow shape going through the water as efficient as it can be. But there's no denying that if you've got an exposed Gen 2 on the bottom of a board, you have to drag that unit through the water. Now, anyone that rides Gen 2 knows that you can feel it, but it's really not that bad. Like I always say, it's visually way more in your face than it is physically. The faster you go, the bigger the waves that you want to catch, and the more you're pushing that side of the boundary, or just generally the faster you want to do foiling, the more that impact is, because the speed relative to drag and surface area isn't like a linear thing. It's, so that's when a trenched board really does come into its own, and that you can get rid of that frontal surface area, that drag component, and you can push it into the center of the board and get it out of the water flow. But it's never a perfect one-for-one. You do also have, the board's going to lose a bit of literage and a bit of volume. But what I'm certainly finding is that the volume and literage of these boards is becoming far less relevant. Like I'm 96 kilos, and correct me if I'm wrong, a trenched 5.4 cruiser, what's the literage on that now?
36.
36. What was it before the trench?
It was still 36. He's just replaced the literage in the more the chest area now.
Is that on your board? Because I don't know if that happened on the one I'm on.
Oh, really? Maybe yours is just 30 litres.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's close to 30 litres because I seem to remember it lost 6 litres. So a 30-litre board for me is basically submerged.
Yeah,
I've got the tip will come out if I'm lying on it, if I pull it up.
Yeah, no,
but it doesn't make any difference.
I totally agree. Like I personally ride a 30-litre board for foil drive. However, it was very hard to educate the community of what you just said. Like literage really doesn't. Wouldn't say it doesn't matter. It still matters. However, the shape of the board matters a lot more than the literage. And a lot of people were coming from 50-litre boards, and when they seen the cruiser advertised as 36 litres, they were like, "Oh, I can't ride a board that low litres." But everyone that has ridden the board, you're right. I don't need that much litres, especially when I've got the Gen 2 setup, which has got so much power. It's more just about the real estate on the board of where to put your hands and being able to pop up. So
planing surface.
Exactly.
Just a good planing surface. But I love it. I mean, I'm now riding 30-litre boards at my body weight, 96 kilos. That's no, I don't think that's like a normal combination. As in, you would normally assume you would have a bigger board, more literage to make it easier. But with the trenched unit, with Gen 2, the HP motor and the HP battery, it's pretty good. It's just the best of all 4 bits, and I'm just having the best time on it. And the efficiency has been awesome. But the touchdown and the glide and the feel of the cruiser board, I'm just loving it. Like it just feels really natural. And when I say the touchdown, it's not so much like the box isn't there. That never really fazed me that much, because if you're at a point in your foiling career where you can control your height over the water on a wave for, let's say, 95% of your session, if you're at the ability that your pitch control is good enough that you're not really touching down unless you're deliberately doing it, then I argue the box being exposed is kind of irrelevant to a degree. But when you can trench it and push it further in, you just straight up get a performance increase in the feel and connectivity to your feet because that mass is closer. So I have had to recalibrate a little bit because I normally like to run relatively long masts. So I lost 5 centimeters as soon as I trenched the unit. So that was a few sessions of just calibration and just getting used to that. But again, like you put them all together, it's pretty hard to go back.
I got a question that someone sent in that, like, with these trench boards, why aren't you making a rear loading battery?
It sounds easy, but it's not. If you look at our Gen 2 unit, it's literally only millimeters taller from the bottom and top as the battery. Let me try and say that better. If you look at the thickness of the battery and then you look at the thickness of a Gen 2 unit, there's only a few millimeters above and below the actual system. That's how much we've pushed our overall size. You still need a place to house a speed controller, a receiver, a Bluetooth module, some other little PCBs, a wiring loom, a plug, an O-ring, and an interface to connect a motor. So if you factor all that in and you want to do a rear accessed battery, it's a total redesign of the whole architecture, because you either have to have that removable, which is not desirable for longevity and reliability, or you have to relocate and reroute all those cables and connectors and interfaces to the front. Now, again, Gen 2 is designed to be something that can be used on anything and everything. So you kind of have to try and find a happy balance. I personally believe a trenched board with split bolts, which granted the world doesn't know about and hasn't used yet, but it's a special bolt that we've made for Gen 2, which allows you to take the unit on and put it back on and reline it up with total ease. I think they're easier than normal bolts on a normal foil. The inconvenience of taking the unit out to putting it back in, I think, is almost irrelevant for the performance that you get without having to have a special unit. Does that make sense? Like we could do it, sure. We've looked into it, but that comes with a lot of other compromises and a lot of other things that aren't immediately obvious until you start trying to physically make it work in the real world. The thought experiments, I get it. It makes sense. Believe me, I've looked at it. But physical execution is a whole different ballgame. So I wish it was easier to make a lot of this stuff the way it is. But it's not until you do it 5 days a week, every week for a living, that you have a bit more of a comprehension of just how much work goes into making it physically work like it has to.
Yeah,
I could be wrong.
I just shot yesterday the marketing for the new Amos Cruiser, and the big message in it is that I'm creating a board that is the most high-performing foil drive board that you can get. I'm not creating a board that is made for changing batteries. If you want that, you should probably just get a regular board that you can take the battery on and off, without a trench. Like, if that's what you're looking for in a foil drive board, I totally recommend that. And I've already got that. I've got the original Cruiser. However, if you're looking for a board that you want the best possible feeling of the closest thing that you can get to foiling without a foil assist, this is it. And that's the direction that we're heading, because, we're all foilers. We're not e-foilers. We want that feeling of free foiling. We want that assist to help us to get to certain spots, or longer runtime, or more time on your feet. However, at the end of the day, we love riding waves, we love riding swell. And when you've got that feeling where you can practically tell that your foil drive's not even there anymore, it's incredible. It's a magic power.
Yep. It's just that endless pursuit for more performance. I mean, I'm involved in all sorts of motorsport, racing, motorsport sort of stuff. It's endless, like the pursuit for more performance, less weight, less curb weight, less sprung weight, more power, less heat, all these things. It seems to be no end. But you're either chasing it or you're not. And I think that's one of the best things about foiling for me, as someone who's obsessed with tinkering and trying to improve stuff, versus coming from surfing. I personally was never, I can surf, but I'm not that great. I could never really, changing board and fins and stuff, feel a huge amount of difference. I could feel it, sure, yes, the different board, but the actual level of difference from the hardware to the performance output I'd get out of it was relatively minor. With foiling, I don't need to tell you this, like the amount of tuning that you can do between the wing and the tail and the mast and the fuse and the board and the mast track position, and now the battery weight and now the battery position, not only in the X axis of the board, but the Z axis now, and then the motor and then the propellers. Like, it's just this huge array of things that you can play with. I love it. I think it's sick because you get to play with the setup, and I personally think the feel and the output you get is super obvious. Like, you can actually go, wow, I'm definitely using the 2-blade prop today. Like, it's definitely faster. I'm punching into that groundswell easier, but the takeoff's a little bit slower. Or, I've got the bigger battery today. I feel a little bit more nose weight. I feel it's a little bit slower on the pump because there's more inertia. And then I put the sport battery in. Oof, it feels lighter. It feels more nimble. All that sort of stuff. And I think that's what we really strive for at Four Drivers. You just want to make sure it's a performance-orientated product that doesn't preclude anyone without, like look at the slim performance. Like that is pushing it to the limit, just how small and lightweight you can make it. And there's plenty of people out there that love them for that. But then there's also lots of people that are just like, I'm not interested in a short runtime. Give me the max. So we're always trying to cater for everyone, which makes our job harder because you have to think about so many different things and purchase and supply and stock and warrant and all that sort of stuff, more bits. But when you're committed to the cause, you got to do it. And, just like yourself, it's no small undertaking to go and create a new line of board just for foil drive. But if you're chasing that peak performance, you got to do it. It's not, you can't just change the paint scheme and say, ta-da, it's better.
That actually leads me to another question. Yep. You're going to put that technology into a slim performance battery, and would that equal 40% more runtime or whatever it is? Or is it just not as much demand for the slim?
We can, and we probably will at some point, but at the moment the focus has been the max because it's just so many, it has such a high sales volume, and it's just splitting up attention span as to what we can do with everything. But yes, I'd say there'll be an update at some point for the slim. That only resides in the battery because you can use the HP motor on the slim straight away. There's nothing you have to do, just bolt it off. As for the batteries, for the performance, like the performance battery, will they ever get the new cells? At some point, yes. We'll probably do some sort of a run out sale of the current batteries at some point if we decide to do that, to move out current stock for new stuff. But for now, we're doing it for the max range because that's where the majority of the sales are. And the most people that want more runtime generally have a better unit. So,
Totally.
I'll never forget that day that you did 2 downwinders on the slim. And you two 15-kilometre runs, and you still had 30 or 40% left on slim. That's disgusting. We're just like, that's so unfair.
There's definitely a place for the slim, and I think it's crazy how high performance you made that setup. But yeah, I definitely noticed, like working for you guys now, like, the main customer's looking for longer runtime, hence why you made the HP battery and the motor.
Yeah.
So and what's really cool is that it's virtually the exact same thing. It's just 10 mil longer, that motor, and I can't notice it. I really can't notice the difference. Like you could do a blind test on me and put on a normal V2 motor and a HP motor, and it'd be hard for me to figure out what's
is
what.
It? Yeah.
Oh, totally.
I'm surprised that you can't feel that. How good you are.
It's just I'm
subtle. It's subtle.
I'm such a big advocate for throttle control. That's why I pretty much dumb down all my settings. Because the one thing I hate is when you pull the trigger so hard that you come out of the water and you go, and then you come back in and it kind of like for a second stalls, and then you pull the trigger hard again and it goes again. I hate that. I'm so much more rather the board just skimming on the water and it's just going one speed. And then when you want to foil, then you pop it up and you're not touching the pod. Like that's for me, that's how I like to foil drive.
That brings up a good point. I forgot to touch base on that. So one of the other benefits of the HP motor is the RPM delta is a lot closer. So I think I do talk about this in the HP motor release video. But basically, the smaller rotor, when let's say you're foiling along and you need 65% motor power to sustain flight, when that motor comes out of the water and it unloads because the water's no longer there, it'll spin up a lot quicker. So it might go up by nearly 1,000 revs just because it's got no load on it. And then when you drop that motor back in the water, those 1,000 revs can't stay there. Otherwise, you'd be going super fast. So it surges with a bit of thrust, and it gives you that sort of pitching moment because it's got to go somewhere, right? That's just because the torque of the motor isn't as high as the torque of the HP motor. So this motor, to do that same flight through the water, you might be sitting at 60% throttle, not 65. So that means this thing, it's a little nerdy, but the propeller is actually doing exactly the same amount of RPM, irrespective of the motor. It doesn't matter which motor it is, because the propellers is a fixed propeller. RPM would derive how much thrust you're making. It's just the motor doesn't need as much power being pushed into it to spin those propellers at the same RPM. Therefore, when the motor goes out of the water into the air, it won't spin up as much because it actually doesn't have as much of a delta in throttle versus RPM as the smaller one does. So that's why everyone who's ever tested the HP, all the customers around HP, so I say customers, demo team riders, ambassadors, they all say the same thing. It feels smoother. It feels like it's some of the guys like it feels like a Rolls Royce engine. It feels smooth, and it only feels smooth because it's not surging anywhere near as much, and it's spinning at a slower RPM delta in and out, and it's just got more torque and authority. So I can come in and out of the water under load, and it doesn't as much. It'll just sort of be way more cruisy and gentle. So that's another huge bonus for HP. And if anyone's in a spot where they've got a lot of other surfers or foilers or just other water users, and you're super noise conscious because you're trying to not annoy people because you're running a super slammed unit, the HP is a great option because you'll find the noise goes down heaps versus the normal size motor. That's actually quite a big bonus.
Yeah, that's cool to hear. I remember when you first gave me this HP stuff.
Yep.
Because I'm not a real techie, nerdy guy, some of this stuff goes over my head. But you made a really good analogy where it's like, okay, so it's the same power output. However, you've got the HP motor is like a super strong, fit guy at the gym, and then you've got the normal motor, which is just like a normal person that goes to the gym. They're doing the same output, like lifting the same weight, but one guy finds it super easy versus the other guy is struggling, but he's still getting the job done. Yeah, is that kind of the right way of putting it?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
and that really clicked in my mind when you said that. It's like it's doing the same job, however, the HP motor is just finding it way easier to do it because it's a bigger motor.
Correct. Yeah, and that analogy is pretty good because it does paint the picture quite well, But that guy who's lifting it easier, the big muscle bloke, he's a bit heavier.
Yes,
he's got more muscle, so he doesn't get to be as nimble or as fast around corners and that sort of stuff because he's just heavier. So you're always trading something for something else. I think you need to be like customers need to be very, very wary of total BS marketing. I don't know. Are we allowed to swear in our podcast?
Yeah, you can say that.
Just be like be very aware of just bullshit marketing because as the assist technology that we develop continues to grow, it's inevitable. Well, there'll be people that are trying to copy stuff and do their own versions. And we've seen some attempts at it. They will try and just lie to customers and say, "Oh, I've got this 4,000 or 5,000 watt motor," and all these sensationalized numbers, and it's just I can see through it in an instant that this motor here can run technically at like 5,000 watts for a period of time. We just need to be wary of all the bullshit marketing that's out there or coming out, not from us, but as more and more people try and copy what we're doing, and these cheaper variants come out. And look, I can't speak for everything because I don't know all the stuff, but I've seen from what I've seen so far, there are a lot of just really misleading things like people quote, "I've got a 4,000 or 5,000 watt motor and it's got X, Y, Z." It's just bullshit. Like if we were to do the same, we would advertise this as the new 5,000 watt motor for foil drive. Yeah. But that's just absolute crap because yes, this motor could technically consume 5,000 watts, from a magnet and copper winding perspective, but it'll do it for like 3 seconds before this plug literally melts and is never usable ever again. Or your battery wouldn't coat, your plugs won't coat, the speed controller won't coat, the wires wouldn't coat. Just be mindful. I think people just need to be really careful about what they believe and what they're told. That's why we do these long form podcasts. That's why we have such an active group. We've got testers all over the world. And me personally, I just won't stand for it. Like, it's got to be what it's got to be. That's going to be a challenge in the future. As people try and find relevancy, I think you can see it in the foiling market to a degree as well. Just, everyone's struggling for relevancy with wings and masts and stiffness and this and that. High modulus, super high modulus, mega crazy, super high modulus.
No, but that's a really good point, because I think, people can be tricked with marketing and hear all these like new gains that potentially it could do, like what you said, for 3 seconds, but then your unit will blow up. However, I think the smartest thing to do is to just kind of, hear from other people's experiences. I think if you talk to any foil drive users, they're probably more than happy to recommend you to get one. So I think that's the smartest way to kind of, maybe if you're before purchasing the product, is just talk to the community of foil assist people. Talk to people that are using all different brands and just get a good gauge on what, because we don't want people buying stuff twice. That's the worst thing that can happen. If you want to get something, just do your research. Hopefully that we're putting enough information out there that can kind of, and we're super transparent brand. Like, you can reach in, you can call support, and there's always going to get a message back in the same day or the day after. All our information's online. We're not hiding anything. So that's what we're presenting here at Foil Drive. Is we all use our product and we swear by it. And if we've got issues, we'll tell you what and we're constantly fixing. We're not perfect. We're always like trying to fix the bugs that are going on, which happen with a super high tech product.
It's not exactly we're not exactly making a product that sits on a shelf and has a blinking light. Like, it goes in the ocean, gets beaten up in waves, flogged on the sand. Like, it's a rough environment. So it's not something that anyone should get into if they're not willing to put in the effort to make it durable, because it gets an absolute flogging. And the marine industry is pretty used to that. So, but again, like, it's, when I say you can get a 40% increase in runtime, I back that up, because it's just the math worked out and the testing showed the result. End of story. Like, I have no doubt there'll be some people on the forums that will get more than me, and then there'll be some other people on the forums that get a lot less. But the reasons will be, there'll be good reasons why. Like, I've had some friends that I've been foiling with for years that used to swear that I had bigger batteries than them because I'd get 10 minutes longer. This is back when Gen 2 first came out. And it had nothing to do with it. It was just they spent way more time with too much throttle on, going rah, 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 across the water, just spitting bubbles everywhere. They're just wasting power. It wasn't until one guy, you know who this is if he's watching it, got his remote and I turned it down. I didn't let him have full throttle. I'm like, you don't need it. Stop wasting it. And he got same runtime. He was just burning it up, pushing bubbles around. So, but again, as I say, the overall performance numbers they're true. You get what you get, and I'm doing it, so other people should be able to do it too. It just depends on how you use it. And as I was saying before, it can be a slippery slope. You turn it up to 28%, big motor, big battery, you start using a small foil, you start taking off in more locations. You don't care about, do I catch a wave, do I go with the wind? You just start almost just, not bad. I suppose you could say you start being a little bit wasteful. You're not going to get that same 40% benefit than if you were trying to do it the same way. Does that make sense? Am I making sense? Like,
Makes total sense.
I could probably stretch a session out to 50% more runtime if I turned it down and I was extra, even more attentive to trying to be efficient. But I just don't care that much. Like 30-40% more runtime, I'm stoked. I often don't. I don't have enough time to do more than 2 batteries anyway. So courses for courses, but it's there if you want it.
Perfect. Well, I think that's been roughly an hour. I don't want to steal too much of your time, but I think we've really gone through all that high performance stuff. Do you think we've missed anything that you want to reach out? I mean, tell people last things?
I think that HP performance motor has got more in the pipeline for it than just what people see now. What am I trying to say? If you buy a HP motor now, there's some really cool collaborative products coming out where we're working with brands to make fully integrated, super sexy carbon fiber masts where the pod is physically molded into the mast. And you'll be able to bolt on a HP or a normal V2 motor onto those masts. So it's future-proofed for other cool stuff that's coming down the track, more so than it just is what you see now. So the family of motors that four-wheel drive sells will always be like, you can tune and play with it and chop them, change them, and move them around. So I think there's some really cool stuff. Like it's only getting better. And that's like one of my philosophies is with the four-wheel drive Gen 2, I want it to age like a wine. I want it to get better over time, not just stay stuck in a, it's like, well, that's now 2 years old and it's an old one. If anything, I want the unit to get better. So 2 years after ownership, if someone's still got their Gen 2, it's like that unit is actually better and more capable than it was when I first bought it. And not many products do that. Not many products get better over time. The only one I can think of is like a Tesla. You know, you buy it and yes, there's some features and upgrades and software packages that I think they charge their customers for, but the actual car gets better over time. The product actually improves through ownership, as opposed to nearly every other product that I know of that just gets older and less relevant. So we're really trying to factor that into our price point and modeling is we don't want these things to just be disposable items. They're things that people will own for years and years and years and get lots of good use out of it and just be super brand loyal because they got such good treatment and will be excited for whatever the future holds.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Paul. I'm sure you've got a million more meetings to talk foil drive about, but we appreciate your time today, and I hope that answered a lot of people's questions about the new HP line. I'm stoked to be riding the HP line, and I hope a few more people can jump on it and feel what we just spoke about. And until the next tech talk, we'll see you then.
All right. Bye, everyone. Cheers.